I find Rocky Horror Picture Show to be almost like a great litmus test for people, gay, straight, whatever. If you're out of the norm, I think most people end up finding that back alley into the secret door into a world that you never knew existed. Edict to that the monster must die. It really is saying the triumph of normal society.
Right.
It's the triumph over the other. It's the triumph over what is not accepted.
On this episode, we are joined by Zach Cooke. Zach is a designer, artist, film geek, a producer in several no-budget films, and a drag performer. He has artwork in several galleries around the Columbus, Ohio area. We discuss with him the similarities of underground cultures such as being an outcast in the horror and other general subcultures to a queer lifestyle. We go in detail about his love of Elvira and how she actually inspired all three of us, but in very different ways. The effects of growing up watching movies such as Rocky Horror Picture Show, black and white horror films, the slashers of the 80s, and our love of absurd cult films. We go into queer culture in general and its general representation, or sometimes misrepresentation, in horror movies. So don't touch that dial and step into the time warp of horror movies, Elvira, and a late night picture show. And welcome to the Spooky Door. With us today is Zach Cooke. Zach is one of my closest friends, and we've been friends for, God, I don't know, very long time.
Yeah, quite a few years now.
Once upon a time.
And so today we're going to dive into horror subculture, queer horror subculture, all kinds of crazy shit. So let's go ahead and dive in.
Say, why are we even going to try to describe it? Because I feel like
This is going to go all over the place.
it's going to be great, though.
And we're going to start off with everybody's favorite, Elvira.
Yeah.
It's a good starting place.
It is.
It's
I mean,
the perfect starting place.
boobs. Everyone loves boobs. I mean,
Again,
from
your perspective.
when I think Elvira,
that's just the point.
Yeah.
no, I mean, literally,
That we
a guy
made, though.
went to a horror convention with a caster set and actually casted a plastered pairs of her tits.
Yes, I do know about this.
That's iconic.
I just think it's amazing, too, that she just even, let it happen.
Exists.
That's her,
It's
that's, how cool she is, though. She's like,
Well,
She-
she understands her
Right,
character,
well,
who
that's
she
what I
is,
mean.
and her fandom.
yes.
She literally has a
100%.
mouse pad that's two lumps and it's the boobs.
Like,
I mean, she knows
she
what's
knows.
up.
Yeah.
She does. She's definitely taken it and just run with it.
I mean, starting off with, especially, even for me, it's when I think Elvira, I think of her look and stuff like that.
Why
but-
don't we start there? Because that's what you think,
Well,
but we all
no, that's
three have
not-
a different
That's
thought.
not where I exactly think.
Okay, but again, still the
I
point
was
is
more
we
so doing a
all,
joke.
We all three have a
Right.
different
But for me,
perspective.
with her, when I think of Elvira, really, she's one of the people that introduced me to, House on Haunted Hill.
right.
All these amazing horror B-movie camp fests. I've watched and learned all these movies is because of her show that
But
she
as
had.
far as the boob comment though, that was the audience. That was the original thing. Was
Right, that was, kind of what drew
And now
people
it's-
in. It's become part of her staple.
Yeah, but now it's a whole. There's a
All
whole
kinds of
thing
stuff,
as
yeah.
far as people that like her for different reasons.
Right.
Zach, why do you love Elvira?
Let me count the ways.
You're like a walking Elvira encyclopedia.
I mean, just a little bit. And I am by far not at all the biggest Elvira fan of the bunch, but I definitely have a special place in my heart for her and what she's done. Actually, the first time I ever got to meet her was in Salem, Massachusetts.
How perfect is that?
It was one of those moments of kismet.
I'm jealous for two reasons. One, you met Elvira, and two, you've been to Salem, Massachusetts.
Same. I was just gonna say the both of those.
Well, I can give you my 5-second review. Not worth it.
Okay.
Not of
Duly
meeting
noted.
Elvira, but of Salem, Massachusetts.
No.
That I guess I knew
I've
what you meant.
heard.
I knew what you meant there.
Fun if you're a history nerd.
Well,
but
I am, so then it might be fun.
and
for
if
me.
you like very low, sweetly low budget attractions and a
don't.
lot of shopping,
Yeah.
that's about it. But I just randomly stumbled upon that Elvira was going to be at the Salem, Massachusetts Horror Con, whatever they named it. I think that might have been the name. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was so cool. I've always wanted to go to Salem, and I've always wanted to like see Elvira in person. What if we do this at the same time? So it worked out. Went down to Salem, to the Horror Con, got to meet Elvira. I have a picture of me sitting on the couch with her. And then I also happen to have an eyeshadow palette that was her collaboration with a horror beauty brand.
I need that.
Yeah, it was really cool. The formula, for those who truly care, the formulas were okay.
Well, I was gonna ask because I was gonna say, did you ever use it, or did you were just too like?
No, I've used it. They were all right. They definitely not one of my favorites.
Most time when it comes to any type of beauty product, or even like anything really, when it comes to any type of hygiene, for like any time that's like a celebrity endorsed, it's usually crap.
Unless it's Rihanna.
I was gonna say that.
I'll defend Fenty.
She's got a pretty solid makeup line.
Oh, Fenty's stupid. But back on topic. So
anyway, Elvira,
I have Elvira's makeup. I have it's not compact, it's the eyeshadow palette. It's like the shape of a coffin, and it has her on the front and everything. And in gold Sharpie, it says Elvira. She wrote it on there. And the tidbit she told me is that if you take the eyeshadow pans out of the case, underneath each one of the eyeshadow pans is like a quote from the movie. Oh. So you wouldn't know unless you took them out, which is kind of strange, like a weird, strange little cool thing. Oh, she knew. But I got to meet her. Of course, she is a itty bitty little thing. It's, I met her as Elvira on the couch for the photo op, and then I met her to sign the makeup compact as Cassandra Peterson. She's a tiny little thing. So was very sweet. But I will tell you, oh my goodness, is her security very, very strict.
I bet it has to be though.
It has to be.
Oh, I can't imagine the stuff they've had to deal with concerning her and people who probably just go a little overboard at times.
Not only is she like a horror icon, she's now a queer icon, and she's
that was new. That's new.
Yeah, and then also on top of that, she's also a sex icon.
Okay, and let's be honest, if there's any people out there who like her now just because she's gay, you're really late to the train, honey.
You probably already should have liked her.
Right.
Maybe
she's fantastic, and
different things can bring people to learn about new people in different ways, but I mean, you're really late to the game if now all of a sudden you're discovering her because she came out as lesbian with her partner.
Right. Right.
Trust me, we were all liking her way before then.
It's like,
but she, as probably, I would say, the most iconic horror host.
I will
most
say
well
too,
known.
I love her story though when she came out about how they met and everything. It's a very cute little story.
I'm gonna have to look that up because I really just skimmed the news reports.
Okay, then I'm not gonna say anything about it, but
definitely
you'll have to look it up and read it because there is an article where she tells how they met and stuff, and it's pretty cute.
I need to read the book, Cruelly Yours, her memoir. I gotta read it. It's on the list.
That's such a huge list. So.
I know, the giant list of books that you're never gonna get through.
Nope.
But Elvira, she's reached that status of just public consciousness. You just know, no matter who you are, you've probably heard of Elvira. You maybe have never seen a movie of hers. You maybe have never done literally anything or seen anything concerning her, but she's reached that level of
even
if you
zeitgeist.
saw her, you would know that's Elvira.
Even my mom, who knows absolutely nothing about horror, pop culture, I mean, as far as that type of subculture, she knows who she is.
Oh yeah,
my mom is following that stuff. She hates bad movie, campy old black and white movies. She's like, why are you always watching this crap? And she knows who she is.
Yeah, which mad respect for a woman who is extremely sexual or like sexually outward. And in the horror zone to reach that level of consciousness.
Right.
And I think for me, like as a woman, that's why I love her so much. Like, because I'm like, that's fantastic that she's out there like that and she doesn't care.
Well, like we were talking, like before we started recording, like we were talking about Sven Gulli, who Elvira works with a lot. You weren't even sure who that was. Like,
no,
you knew
I've heard the name,
but you didn't
He's
really know.
also fantastic.
And he's just as campy looking and ridiculous over the top on his show.
His I love his like.
Yeah,
whole...
he looks like an MC for a drag show.
And even his like set is very campy. I love it. I love his set. And he has cheesy jokes also, which is so fantastic.
Paul Bearer, Undertaker's manager. He looks like Paul Bearer.
Yes, it's that kind of.
And he wears a top hat.
Okay.
But he carries around a rubber chicken with him, and it's like most ridiculous
whole
over
thing.
the top. Yeah, but him and Elvira will work.
The rubber chicken's like a whole character.
Yeah, I know.
That's awesome.
It's like all in the same vein of like Mystery Science Theater as well.
Yes, it's really good. It's really good.
That's a little different because they're not hosting. I mean, they're hosting, but they're not like they're riffing on movies instead of more of a this is the movie, blah blah blah. Like this is what we're doing.
Yeah, like they riff on it. They don't really like here's the movie and like spitting out facts about it.
Right. No, they're more like here's the worst movie we could dig up, and we are gonna torture you along with torturing ourselves with watching this crap.
Yeah, that's one thing about Elvira. I think that I guess when I finally, because my first introduction to Elvira in like her own media was the movie Elvira. Her first movie, it was a flop.
It's campy as hell.
It is.
Well, it was a flop mostly. Like if you look it up, it's actually I think the not production, but like the distributing company went under like the day before it hit theaters or something. So it like didn't get the distribution or the marketing backing that was supposed to. And it just bit the dust, but it's gone on to be.
That's a cult film.
Well, yeah. I mean, technically it would be a cult film because it had a low preview.
Cult film is also
but
just a movie
weekend.
that would be, has its own fan base.
Well,
that's kind of what gets like an underground movie that gets its huge fan base. That's kind of what a cult film. That's usually
according to John Waters, who I asked about in person.
Okay,
I have
He's got you.
spoken
I know.
to John Waters himself, because I literally accidentally snuck into like a special viewing of his art show that was being put on, and I accidentally walked into like the members only time.
Oops.
And there was John Waters walking around, and I was like, oh my God. According to John Waters, it is a movie that is initially financially and culturally unsuccessful, but goes on to have a second life through repeated viewings. Yeah. One cult film that you don't think of is It's a Wonderful Life. That's a cult film because it was initially incredibly
flop.
It was a flop, and then because of showings on TV, it became the kind of ubiquitous Christmas movie.
That's actually my favorite Christmas movie too.
But that movie, but for me, like a cult film, I mean that by definition, yes. But for me, a cult film usually is on the outskirts of Hollywood too, though.
Well, but if you would think about it, anything on the outskirts most likely is flopped when it came out. Yeah. So
it would have been at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But like even big flops, don't necessarily make cult status.
No, because the second part to cult status is that it goes on to have a second life through a dedicated fan base.
Yeah, and some movies just are. You think that this is going to be a great cult movie, and you watch it, and it's like, oh no, this movie's terrible. It's garbage.
Almost any cult film that I've ever seen, I can see why somebody would like it, or like I can see the appeal, even if it doesn't appeal to me. There's something there. So I saw Elvira in her movie, which if you haven't seen it, immediately
go do that right now.
It's funny as hell.
Yes, I enjoy it.
It's hilarious. It is a fish out of water story. Anybody who has felt different can immediately
one of my things that I love about it.
Identify with that film. It has one of the best lines of all time, which is when she's under the marquee and the letter gets dropped on her head. And the guy comes down the ladder and says, "How's your head?" And she says, "Haven't had any complaints yet." It's so stupid and so good.
The jokes in it too, like, are just...
Yeah, I mean, one of the, like, and I don't want to spoil too much because a lot of it is a little bit of the shock factor of what happens.
I have a feeling if you're listening to this podcast, more likely you've seen this movie.
Let's hope so.
Yeah, that's true. If you haven't,
maybe that's not all true,
you.
but if it's like people who are like love horror and camp and cult films generally will go out of their way to find all of them.
Give them all a go.
They will go out of their way to. It's like people who love horror will and all that stuff will go out of their way to find stuff. Mm-hmm. Like it's not like it has to be given to them. Like you have to, if you're, especially back in the day, if you were a horror fan, you had to work for it.
Yeah, like, or you had to watch people like Elvira who were putting on these seldom seen movies that were either terrible or weird or bad, and she's putting them on because someone needed to fill airspace and they needed something cheap to do, and all these movies were probably like, I don't know, 5 cents a pop.
Right. And you know, like for me, I think I knew Elvira when she was doing the movie hosting, and I remember, you know, turning on the TV at the night as a child and being like, oh my gosh, this woman is like everything. This is the embodiment of everything that I would love to be. And then I found out about the movie, and I was like, I didn't even know what it was about, the context, what the genre was going to be. I did not care. I was like, Elvira is in a movie. I have to see it as soon as possible.
Oh, and her in that car in the opening scenes.
Oh my gosh.
Iconic. Like, I want that car, and I'm pretty sure she said that she has it or has some version of it, because she ended up, I think, having to like buy it later down the line. Like she ended up having to like buy it from a dealer or something because she eventually wanted it to be able to tour with. I don't think it runs, if I remember correctly. It doesn't run anymore, but they bring it out just like the couch. Yeah, it's just too iconic, and so then she just she has to hold on to it. And I got to sit on the couch when I met her, which was really cool. The picture's terrible. It's one of those times when you're like, what the hell was I doing with my hand? Why?
And if you're watching this on video, it's popping up right now.
Oh yeah, I will send it to you. It's not great. It's a little bit of a deer in headlights moment, but can you blame me? She had two big headlights right there.
So I had a very similar experience, like the deer in headlight moment when I met Robert Englund. I was just like, I don't know what to say.
Elaborate. Who is this?
So Robert Englund is
I'm going to tell him.
He is the individual who played Freddy Krueger.
Oh, okay.
He is also in the current season of
Nope,
but you know, I'm not gonna say it. You're right. I don't want to spoil it for anybody.
For those who know, you know.
Right. For if you know, then you know what I was about to say. He's also done some smaller indie movies. He's just done a lot. I could go on about the amazing things he's done, and he's just a fantastic person to meet too, because you'll bring him stuff to sign, and it could be the most obscure little piece of thing, and he knows the entire history behind it. But I met him, and I always thought to myself that I would never be one of those people that like froze up when I met somebody. But you know what I did? I froze up because I didn't know what to say, because I got, this was somebody I'm like grew up seeing on TV. Nightmare on Elm Street is my absolute favorite horror series, and I just did not know what to say to this man that I grew up with.
Kind of going back to like what we were talking about, the whole genre of like queer and horror. Nightmare on Elm Street 2 is considered one of the first queer horror films. I did some research into this because I didn't know
that, but I can see.
Yeah, like, I guess like there's like so many undertones. Like one of the main characters is pretty much obviously gay.
Yeah.
Well, the lead actor that played him is gay. Okay. Which is actually one of the more fascinating things I think about horror, and maybe growing up, like being in queer culture, and especially more specifically in my zone, which is gay culture. and that kind of stuff. Like a lot of things are subtext. Up until recently,
I was going to say,
we didn't have "Call Me by Your Name."
The older, the movie was, the more it had to be. I also find those movies very interesting because the first one is like one of the lesser known movies that, like, when people say Johnny Depp movies, that no one really thinks of.
No, Johnny Depp, yeah, that's the first. That's usually that was one of his first movies.
Yeah,
so
but that was one of
usually
his first
my
movies.
first go-to.
I'm not going to say
Depp.
anything else about like his character, what happens in case
Oh God,
you haven't seen it. But again, if you
he's one of the coolest death scenes on in Nightmare on Elm Street, like history. If I'm ruining that for you, you're
sorry, you
30, 40 years late.
You should have seen it already, and this is your fault at this point, because it's a fantastic movie. One of the best horror movies.
Yeah, and him in that crop top. That was for a certain section of people.
It's sure.
Doing a little bit of research before this episode, there was a movie called Hellbent. I didn't get a chance to watch it yet, but it's a 2006 slasher with an all-gay cast.
Yes.
And it's considered...
I've not seen that either, but we need to watch it.
Because I looked it up, and it's the very first real like LGBTQ like horror film.
That's fantastic.
And I was kind of sad that it was from 2006. I thought there might be one way prior before that.
Kind of, but
going back, I guess even like the original Haunting has some lesbian vibes going on in it, which the book does too.
Oh yeah.
So
a great book. If you haven't read The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, go read it. Do yourself a favor. It's I guess you do have to be in the right frame of mind for it because it's slow, and there's a lot of speculation, at least academically, if the ghost or the haunting itself is even real. So if that gives you an idea of the level of quote unquote haunting that's in the book.
Did you see the Netflix show?
No.
Okay.
I have not seen the Netflix show. I've read the book. I
watched the Netflix show. It's still on.
I need to see the one that's in the 2000s that's supposedly horrid.
Oh god, that movie sucked.
Yeah, but that's probably half the fun.
So bad.
No, it
with
sucks.
Liam Neeson.
Okay, so I will tell you, it sucks. It's not one of those like, oh, it sucks and it's good to watch. It sucks and it's
not
hard
even fun
to watch.
It's not even a fun bad movie.
No, it's not. I can't watch it. I've seen it once and like it was hard for me even to sit through the first time I saw it.
I've watched Nuki 4 times, and watching that movie, I'd rather watch Nuki over House.
Okay.
Terrible.
It's so boring. The CGI is atrocious.
Yep.
The acting sucks.
Mm-hmm. All these things.
The special effects is just what kills it. 'Cause it has that really early 2000s, late 90s CGI where everything just looks
bad,
ungodly, fake, and horrible and bad.
Like they should have just stuck to practical
effects.
It
does keep some of the lesbian overtones a little bit.
Well, a little bit. Yeah.
I'll say if you haven't read the book, the lesbian overtones are not obvious, unless it's one of those things of going back to the original source material. It's there, but only there if you want to read it from that angle. It's not like they have an illicit kiss in a hallway. It is really all psychological, the breakdown of a woman and this other female that she has companionship with, but also hates. But it's one of those things where if you're heading in that direction, you can get there. But it's not that it's not there. It's just that it's not as, I think, as solid as some people would want to say it is.
There's a movie from the 70s I've talked about before. It's called The Sentinel. And it's a haunted house, but it's like based in an apartment building. This woman lives in New York, blah, blah, blah. Her neighbors are really crazy, but one of the neighbors is played by the mom from Christmas Vacation, and she's in a lesbian relationship.
Gotta love them lesbians.
I know, and that's from it's from the 70s, so I guess that's
I
why I
feel
was
like,
okay.
Yeah, I was gonna say
that movie's amazing though. It's terrifying too. It's so good for like 70s.
I feel like
dread.
that got accepted a little faster than just like the rest of
everything else
because it was appealing to a male audience as well, because it's the hot lesbians.
Well, if you want to go back to one of the granddaddies, Dracula.
I like that you just said granddaddy.
If you want to go all the way back there, there is actually a good amount of speculation about Bram Stoker, and that he had a relatively complete sexless marriage to a woman, and had great admiration, quote unquote, for males in his writing realm.
I can see that with the way he wrote that character. I could see that.
If you look at the way Jonathan and Dracula react with each other, especially when Jonathan first comes to the hotel and comes to the castle, and the way Dracula's reacting and acting around Jonathan, you could totally see that actually.
Well, and we can vampires. Well, not my favorite monster. Are very rich for subtext.
Okay, let's get to it.
Interview
with the Vampire and Rice. Come on, it's like the gayest love story of all time.
Well, she wrote it. It's written that way in the book,
right? Yeah, and the movie,
it's written a lot gayer.
There's
in the book.
Still jokes about it.
So. Oh yeah, the movie.
It's a joke that never dies.
The movie carries those overtones, but they definitely muted them down.
Well, no, duh. Of course they were going to mute them down, because you got to have sexy vampires for the women.
Right.
That was the whole context of the Buffy the Vampire Slayer show, was all the male vampires. The two main leads, Angel and Spike, were sexy. We're very
Angel.
Sexy. Spike. See, I was over here. Spike.
Both of them.
Really?
I came
Angel? Like the Ben Affleck looking dude.
But no,
David.
Can I say he has aged well?
Oh, she's a full daddy now.
Like when he was doing Bones, like I didn't like him in Buffy, but when he was in
once
Bones,
he got
okay,
a little,
I see now.
Yeah, a few more wrinkles, and you're just all of a sudden,
I see you over there.
But actually, I wanted to make this point if we're going to go down the vampire route. Nosferatu. The original Nosferatu was directed by an openly gay man.
I did not know that.
Let me give credit where credit's due.
So, like, it all goes back to...
Homos?
The horror.
They've been doing a lot. You just didn't know.
Yeah. Hashtag thanks.
It was directed by F.W. Moranu.
I feel like an idiot.
Obviously,
I did not know that.
So bummed I didn't know that.
I didn't. I know, but I'm opposite. I didn't know that. I'm not bummed that I didn't know. I love.
No, I'm just bummed. I couldn't remember the director's name, because it's like one of my favorite movies.
But,
I love that. That's a thing.
1922 Nosferatu.
Yeah, it is one of those things of you can create connections where you feel like where you can come up with connections if you feel like it. But if you really look at it, the vampire as a horror icon is quite queer in the sense of being outside of the heterosexual normal, as a being who functions at night. A being who normally did not ask to have this thing, this kind of disease, curse, whichever way you want to go with vampirism, placed on them. And they are hunted by the rest of the rest of society. Mm-hmm. There's certain connections there that I think a lot of people, especially queer people, make with vampires, or maybe movie monsters in general, because the people that are hunting the monsters are the ones that are hunting you, or causing harm, or that you don't belong to. So you inevitably identify with the monster, because here's this other thing that is either misunderstood or feared or whatever. Like Bride of Frankenstein pretty much showed that Frankenstein was not a monster. He was just misunderstood. He doesn't want to hurt people, but people are afraid of him because they don't understand it, and so they want to kill him. So I think there's always that strong connection.
However, though, in that movie, Frankenstein's the doctor, the monster.
He makes the bride, yeah.
Yes. just for clarification for people that do not.
Which, I mean, honestly, Bride of Frankenstein, that hairstyle is iconic.
100%.
Listen, I have a T-shirt that has like a bunch of the iconic horror movie women on it, and she is one of them.
She's up there right behind you.
Speaking of iconic horror movie women and Elvira, we can't not mention Vampira.
She's I was just gonna. She's also on that shirt that I have.
Who I kind of love that Vampira really hated Elvira.
Didn't she sue her? Mm-hmm. I thought she sued her for not copyright, but some kind of like character infringement or something like that.
Yeah, but pretty much it came down to that you can't own wearing black and being spooky.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. You can't.
But obviously,
everybody's doing it.
As a working woman in a male-dominated industry, she probably was trying to hold on to what she had. But that's one of those instances of just kind of an interesting, progression.
Or it could have just been Elvira ripped on Plan 9 from outer space.
Well, that's where they started pulling from.
Right.
It's very normally well known that's Vampira is something that that character they were pulling from, but they tried to deviate from it enough to not be a straight rip on Vampira once they realized that Vampira was not going to give license for Cassandra Peterson to do a Vampira show. If I'm correct. Which, I mean, I don't have my Elvira fact book in front of me, and I'm only human.
So, please don't hate on it if he's wrong.
Yeah, but...
Because, there's always that person, like...
Oh, good on you for knowing that, but, I mean, I also don't have Wikipedia in front of me right now.
Which you probably do, so you're probably going to go fact check it and then correct him.
Thank you for the correction. I appreciate it. But
I can always put it down below.
Yeah, there we go.
Make sure that's
actively
right.
Correct me during the...
So if you're watching on a video, I'll make sure I correct what you just said.
Yeah, but I feel... but at least in my context, I mean, horror... I love it in the sense that it's always about the other.
Right. Well, it's always like, I think people who are always on the outside are always, that's one of the reasons why they're very drawn to it.
Yeah,
a lot of times.
Yeah, it's one of the, everybody comes for the jump scare, and then the rest of us stay for it afterwards.
And people ultimately like, not just like people on the outside too, people on the, like just normal people too. They really like that feeling of scare, dread, to get those endorphins running. That's why horror's always in the limelight, always in the forefront of everything, because it's always popular.
But you always know, like, there's the side of the people who are really into horror, who are really interested in that.
Right.
As you said, Zach, the other. That you're very interested in, who's supposed to be the bad guy. You're interested in that character.
Yeah, you want to be friends with the Swamp Thing. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, I really like Frankenstein. He's pretty cool. Yeah. In my opinion, like I said, vampires are not normally my top. Werewolves are my top monster if I had to pick one.
Mine is Creature from Black Lagoon.
Yep.
Like, hands down, Creature from Black Lagoon.
I will say yes, and I love one of my favorite things is when they couldn't get the rights, but they did The Shape of Water.
Yes.
Okay. And I just I love that because it was focused on him.
Guillermo del Toro.
Yes.
Props to you, mama. You did it.
And I love the way, not to spoil, but again, you know what? If you haven't seen it, your fault. The end,
so
where
ago.
they've left it kind of open.
Okay, honestly though, that ending reminded me of Splash. Let's be honest, both of those movies end the same way. I'm like, this is just Splash.
It's just Splash. That's what you did.
It's the Tom Hanks mermaid movie.
So when
sorry, this is not horror related for those of you that are rolling
I know,
your
and
eyes.
to me, I think that was to me as being a young girl and the Pretty Mermaid.
Oh yeah, but back to Shape of Water though.
Yes.
And just Guillermo del Toro in general. A lot of his movies have a kind of really obvious queer bent to them, because a lot of them are about standing up to authority and
which is also
going
what
against
I loved
society.
About that movie
And Guillermo, I think I remember hearing him say that he loves monsters.
I also love how he threw in the explanation in there of like, you know, her communication was with ASL and that is how they communicated. So it was like, we're explaining that there is not a language barrier in this scenario. Like,
well, when Julie Adams was making Creature from Black Lagoon, I think they still had, Universal still had the code where, or it might have been Universal, just Hollywood in general, the monster had to die. This is why on all the monster films, horror films, the monster died at every ending of every movie, because that was actually...
Really? And I think Shape of Water was just giving the Creature of the Black Lagoon the ending that he deserved.
All the creatures, the monsters, aliens, whatever, always had to die at the end of the movies. That's why they're always dying at the end of the films. But for Creature of the Black Lagoon, she said she actually felt bad for the creature. Like, she always felt bad for the creature. And she also said she had an amazing time working on that film, that there was no issues or anything like that.
Talk about like, women in
horror. Yeah, Julie fucking Adams. And she had no fucking problems making that movie. It was like, she said it was the easiest like set she ever worked on, other than the fact that her head got clunked on a wall and almost gave her a concussion. But yeah, she said she felt really bad for the creature for the entire time they were working on it.
Well, again though, but Shape of Water is like, that was the whole point. Like that was like, you know, not the opinion she had. Like there was a lot of people that, you know, would become a fan of that movie that, you know, had that opinion, and it was like, we're just giving this creature like what should have happened.
Right.
Well, and if you think about it, that edict to that the monster must die, it really is saying the triumph of normal society. Right. It's the triumph over the other. It's the triumph over what is not accepted.
Right. Now it's like reversed. Keep it alive so we can make a sequel.
Oh, every...
because money.
Like, you can't kill anything off because you gotta make another one.
Oh, I know. And these days also, there's just the whole spat of...
cinematic universes and...
Well, no, just pulling villains from the past and doing a retelling that they're an anti-hero.
Yes, that's a big thing. Like, pull it... that I've noticed too. Pull it from the past or pull it from another country.
Well, thank you, Wicked, because that's pretty much what started all of this. I mean, probably not the first, but definitely the most culturally impactful, especially because of the musical. Kind of showed that this anti-hero from a villain, like taking the villain into anti-hero, was
there are still
successful.
Clips of Wicked that I will watch and like
speaking of
almost
musicals,
cry because it's just so good.
One of the things we have to talk about is Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yep.
Oh, I mean the queen bee.
Yeah, right.
The king on the mountain, the one on top.
Like talking about queer horror musicals, the whole nine, subculture, cult movies. You know, it's just everything that embodies whatever is kind of that movie.
I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, and once again, if you haven't seen Rocky Horror Picture Show, stop now. Go watch it.
Yeah, like, why are you even...
Well, no, finish the episode.
What are you even doing with your life right now that you haven't seen?
Well, you know what? Okay, so to be fair, like the first time I saw it, I hated it.
Well, these days, also, I feel like Rocky Horror Picture Show functions more on legend than it does current relevancy.
Right.
It is so deeply referenced and so deeply regarded by so many people that I feel like a lot of newer viewers find out through it like second or third hand.
Fandom can kill for
anything.
For anything, and also it can kill for new fans. Because like for me, like I didn't even know anything about it. I saw it in probably late 90s, probably around like 97, 96, my parents' basement. And I remember like my friends came over, oh, we should watch it. I'm like, I always heard it was supposed to be like this really fucked up movie, and I always been told not to watch it, blah, blah, blah. I'm warned and yada, yada, yada. And I finally watch it, and I was expecting like some super hyper violent horror film, and I got...
Yeah, you went in wanting Saw, and you got musical.
I was like, what the fuck is this?
That's why you didn't like it the first time.
Well, no, and on top of that being like super, at the time, kind of pretty much homophobic. I was like, what the fuck? This like totally freaked me out. Then like the next time I watched it a couple years later, and I had a much more open mind on shit. And I just like, okay, I fucking get it. And I also loved like bad horror movies by this point too. And I was like, oh my God, I fucking love this. This is amazing.
That's like, for me though, that's that joke where like everybody's like, you have like that one character when they say Tim Curry that you think of, and that's for me.
Frankenfurter.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I love my favorite part of the movie is when he comes in and then at the end he's like the way he's like anticipation.
Oh, iconic.
I'm like that is just to me like.
Well, and I find Rocky Horror Picture Show to be almost like a great litmus test for people, because even though, like you said, you went into it hearing all these things, and then it wasn't what you thought it was going to be, and that's the problem with a lot of stuff. I find is like. It takes a minute for you to learn that if you hear hype about something, especially an older property, you have to go into it remembering everything I have seen up to this point could have been referencing this thing. So you've seen the evolution 10 steps down the line.
Right.
So you've seen everything this original property has done.
I saw it, I didn't even know anything about it. I just had like a VHS tape that was black and it had the lips on it. And on the spine it said Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I think on the back of the box it like had the castle or something like that. So it really didn't explain what the hell the movie was. And my friends were like, "Oh no, we need to watch this." And I watched it and I was like, "What the fuck is this?" And I still have a couple friends or people I know to this day who don't like that movie because of the gay overtones, and I'm like, this is fucking makes a rock.
With them.
Once again, great litmus.
That's why I was like, friends is not even a
strong. A good word is acquaintance.
Person I used to hang out with.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, if you're not down for Rocky Horror Picture Show, I don't think that I can be friends with you because it represents a lot of what is outside of normal culture. I mean, it literally is heteronormative culture running into underground culture of many kinds, because you got Brad and Janet and they're coming from that, like, let's get married at like 18 and have 3.5 kids and a dog and a white picket fence. They come from that world and they crash into
their world is wrecked.
Into this underground group that is headed by Frankenfurter, who is literally creating a man for his own pleasure.
But I will say, let me clarify. When I say their world is wrecked in the most beautiful way possible, because this thing happens to them.
Oh, they end up on the floor, like blown out by the end of the movie.
They didn't even know that they needed.
No, their world is wrecked. I always wondered what would happen to them after the movie.
Well, I guess
that's in my head.
That's
I feel
always
like when they left that, they were probably better off.
Well, I mean, you can watch Shock Treatment, but it's not good.
No, I've always been curious like what would happen to Brad and Janet after.
Well, Shock Treatment is the continuation of Brad and Janet's story, but it's played by entirely different people.
Yeah, I know.
So
and it's also really bad. Not even like a good bad. It's
I like to come up with my own fan theory for what happens.
Same.
I remember I was like on TV and I was like watching a little bit of it, and I was like, whew, wow, this is rough. If I'm saying something's rough, it's rough.
Yeah, my pet theory is that Brad starts cross-dressing and Janet becomes a dominatrix.
And again, I feel like
I just see lots of therapy.
I like, like I feel like they go through that and something happens to make them like open up more and like, and now you're living a great life and you're maybe that's what you are, but you're happy.
But I don't see the two of them ever being together after
and
that.
that's fine. That's okay.
God, no.
I don't see the two of them ever together after all that.
Because it's not a love story.
No, it's not.
No, it's a getting through it story.
Yes. It's a,
like
it's a survival story, but in the most craziest way possible.
Yeah, but I mean, they literally are crashing into this free form society that's doing its own thing that's completely apart from whatever they've experienced, and they crash into it, and you see like the colors are bright, the things are weird, the songs make no sense. What is the time warp and why are we doing it again? Like it and especially Frankenfurter.
And when did we do it in the first place?
Well, it's but going back, like they ate human flesh too. So man, they would be totally fucked up after all.
Yeah,
that.
It's cannibalism. Yeah,
full
like
cannibalism. They would be so fucked up after going through all that.
Yeah, and part of it.
Hopefully, it would make them a better person. But there are some crazy shit that goes.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be some trauma.
Yeah, like.
Well, yeah, but then again, every person at the end of any horror
commits
movie,
suicide.
Right, who hasn't? Yeah.
Brad commits suicide in New York City somewhere on the streets.
I don't like your.
Yeah, sure. Let's go really dark.
Yeah, like
that's where I go.
Like
all right,
and that's not like that's not very like in theme with. I feel like Rocky Horror.
Yeah,
Picture.
Nihilism, the podcast.
Yes.
Great. But I mean, I feel like Rocky Horror is a great point to pull from, because it I wouldn't consider it to be like horror. It still has horror elements
100%.
in it, but the shock value and seeing what you see on the screen isn't replicated almost anywhere else.
Right. I also love that, it's like there's this environment in this place, and here's these like very like clean square people that come into it, but the way it's written and the way it develops is they don't want you to be rooting for those people or siding with them. They're like, we want you to love this chaos and this craziness and this like fabulous, amazing drag queen and like all the obscure weirdness. Like, this is what we want you to hold on to. This is what we want you to like. And I feel like that shows like a lot of like.
I feel like if Frankenfurt didn't die at the end of the movie, like Brad and Janet would have stayed with him, and they would have just joined his group.
Part of
freaks.
me sometimes wishes that just would have happened.
That's what I think would have happened. I think they would have just joined up with Frankenfurter and just ran around with him.
Yeah, but
Frankenfurter was getting like a little.
I think part of it is that Frankenfurter became. From the little bits of Rocky Horror Picture lore, if there is lore,
there's no lore. It's just whatever you get on screen. But
he started. He became abusive. He became self-centered. It became more about everything that he wanted and not the science that I guess the alien race was trying to do.
In the sense of horror, like he was becoming the monster.
Right.
Oh, I mean, when we meet him, he is the monster.
Right. Yes.
He's already the monster.
I think that's
reveal,
more like they don't they give you this big reveal and it's like this fabulous, but then you see like what the original picture of him they show you is not who he is at all.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, it's simultaneously repulsive and exciting, evil, but fabulous. Yeah,
it's also a comedy and shouldn't be taken serious
not at all.
Yeah, so just for clarification, if you've not seen it and you're hearing us describe it in all these ways, like it's
a fucking hilarious. It's hilarious.
Yeah,
it's also a great musical.
Yeah, like once I got over like the first time I saw it. Again, with my closed mind and bullshit. It's like the second time I saw it, I was like, oh my God, like this movie's great.
Yeah, it
makes me laugh every time I watch it. It's hilarious.
Oh. I'm just glad my parents weren't like around.
It's
like,
probably.
I mean, I was late at night the first time I watched it. I feel like if my parents had been up, they would have been like, "You need to turn this off."
Did you say you watched it with your mom first time you watched it?
Yes, when we were talking before the podcast, I was saying the first time I ever watched Rocky Horror Picture Show was like around 16, 17, 18, somewhere in there before I graduated high school. But I knew my mom had a copy of it, and I had always wanted to watch it. When
you had always wanted to watch it, did you know what it was?
No, I didn't know. All I knew was that I had seen it before because my aunt had a copy of the VHS tape, and it was the one that when I went over to the big rack, it was the one I would always pull out and want to look at because like Frankenfurter was on the front or the back of it, and I was just like confused at who this character was on this thing, and I wanted to watch it, and I was always told, no, you can't watch that. And so then later on, I found a little more out about it. My mom had eventually opened up a little bit and said, it's a really weird movie, but, they used to show it at midnight at places, and I went with my friends, and we would go see it. I took your father once. He didn't like it, which, not surprising.
that immediately be like, oh, Dad didn't like it? Fuck yeah, I'll go check it out.
But eventually, the first time I ever watched Rocky Horror Picture Show as a closeted gay kid was with my mother. And it's probably still one of the coolest things that she's done ever is being okay with watching that with me. because at the time when I watched it, it was just like, oh my gosh, what is this? How do I get a piece of whatever this is? Because it was seeing just this whole other section of expression, I guess, that I had never seen before. I didn't know people could do that. I didn't know people could dress up like that and be like this. And so then it, I think, is a part of my story because it showed the other, but in a way that was appealing. Even though Frankenfurter dies at the end and everything, you still see the party. You still see this thing that Brad and Janet discover almost, that's hidden away, which is like which was at the time, especially like a lot of queer culture. It's hidden away. Gay people had to go to bars that you had to go into the back alley and back through, to get in there. And then once you were in there, then it was this whole other world hidden away from the rest of society. And I think that's why I think a lot of people like it, is because you end up finding, gay, straight, whatever, if you're out of the norm, I think most people end up finding that back alley into the secret door into a world that you never knew existed.
Too, and that's the thing too. I was watching this thing not that long ago. I forget what it was, but they were talking about those bars. And the other thing was, like, they had to be really careful of who they told.
Yep.
Too. Like, because, you get the wrong person in that environment, then you've got a witch hunt on your hand because, we've...
Yeah, I mean, gay bars were raided by the police because policies and laws were put into place that criminalized homosexuality or sodomy or whatever, and so then they went through to go look for it. And I've heard many stories from older queer people who it's like there was a light in the bar, and if the light went off, that means a raid was going to happen. So shape up and don't do anything, just hang out, and we'll
don't be gay.
Pretty much, don't be dancing with one another.
Don't be yourself.
Yeah, and so they had to kind of hide for a minute, and then the cops would leave, and then okay, back to business. And I think that's why a lot of people like Rocky Horrors, because it's kind of exemplifying that kind of life where if you're in the rest of society, which in Rocky Horror is exemplified by heterosexual, white, kind of WASP society, you don't know about all these other places and things that go on. And if you happen upon them, it's a whole new world.
Well, I think that, again, kind of goes back to horror and its subgenres in general of like just weird movies is like, if you're into those, you're really going to have to find them. Like now with the internet, it's like really easy. But back in the day, I mean, like God, I even getting a hold of some of these movies or something like that, it was like, oh, yeah, this movie, blah, 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 blah. And like, who has it? And you have to figure out which one of your friends groups had it and go
passing
around,
the VHS
just
copies
get a
back and forth.
VHS copy of, whatever fucking movie you're trying to get a hold of. And I think, like, in some regards too, like that's why I think sometimes some of these movies, like, subcultures were just drawn to them, and they put those in the movies too, because they knew the weird people were going to be watching it. They knew the kids on the outside. They knew the freaks and geeks were going to be watching these movies. So and those are the ones who are making the movies as well.
I also, kind of related to that. Like, I mean, I remember when I was younger and like the Sci-Fi Channel was like really becoming a thing, and I would like stay up late at night till like 3 a.m. because like that's when they would start showing like the really like obscure movies that like not a lot of people watched, or like there wasn't a big fan following of. Like I remember that was like the first time it was like one of those movies that came on at like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. was seeing The People Underneath the Stairs movie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was Craven. Like, and like, that's still like to this day one of my favorite horror movies.
And that was really culture relevant too, because that was one of the first black horror films.
Yes.
It was like almost
that's
all
kind
black.
of where I was going with that, but yeah. So that was like a big deal too. But yeah, kind of to my point too, as well, is like it's like there was a period of time where, you know, like a lot of obscure movies like that, it was like still like we're showing them, but we're going to show them late at night. Kind of like your example of like you have to look for it.
Right.
When we did start showing them and they became more out, it was like we're showing them late at night because that's the audience, you know,
right,
that we want. The stuff that you're showing during the day is, you know, what the popular mass of people want to see. And it's like, we're going to show this stuff, but we're going to show it late at night. So if you want to see it, you got to stay up late and know where to find it, I guess. And it was like, if you didn't have a desire to see that, you weren't going to do that. You would have never known. Like, had I not really been into stuff like that, I wouldn't have started watching the Sci-Fi Channel when it blew up, and I wouldn't have known that was a thing, and I wouldn't have found all those movies in the middle of the night.
Well, actually, having a great way to wrap back, Elvira, as a horror host, was a part of showing those movies late at night.
That's how I found Elvira, was in the middle of the night.
And when you were up late and you were going to watch Elvira, and here was a weird or bad or strange horror movie.
I feel like there's so much stuff like out there that sometimes it's hard for me to keep track of stuff, because if I watch something and it wasn't good, like I'd forget about it. Yeah. I'm like, that just wasn't worth me remembering.
I Stand by the Witch is like one of the best horror films for the last like 20 years.
Fuck yes, that movie is like
intense.
It's very intense.
Another mention, Get Out, and I'm blanking. The one that he did right after that was like Us.
Us.
I'm
excited for Nope.
Oh,
the new one was all about aliens.
I love
that looks terrifying.
I kind of love that he's covering different sections of horror.
Yeah.
I like
Get
that.
Out was like Kidnap. Us was like Twilight Zone kind of alternate reality. Nope is definitely Alien.
Yeah, it's all aliens. It looks awesome. I'm so excited for it.
I cannot wait.
Which I like too, because I don't feel like we've had a good alien movie in a while.
There's some rumors going around. They're going to be remaking Fire in the Sky. Ooh, I'm kind of excited for that.
Listen,
because what's his name? Travis, whatever his name is. He's kind of going to be behind it, I guess.
We could have a whole thing about that. I've seen the original one. It's really good.
Have you seen it?
It's really good. It's one of those.
It's regarded as one of the best UFO movies of all time.
It is absolutely. Okay. I think for me,
all
it's
practical
probably.
Effects.
There's some stuff in it that I can say, watching it, I can tell like there are moments when like, okay, this is a Hollywood embellishing something. And that was the only thing that really bothered me, when I could tell those moments were happening. But then I'm not going to talk about that one, because that's not a more known one. And if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend it.
It's really good.
I wouldn't watch it at night alone. I watched it in the morning, and I didn't watch it by myself. And I think that's why like I was fine, but I think had I been home alone at night watching it, I probably would not have made it through it. And there are some intense moments in it, and it's not even a special effect. It's just the way they're playing out the scene, and the acting in it is just so well done that it kind of like, it gets to you. You're like, wow, like this dude is very traumatized. It's such a good movie. You know, I like stuff that's that's kind of how it thrives. I think that's part of the reason I like a lot of like foreign horror films.
Yeah, because it's more about the dread and the intensity than it is about like,
they don't
when's
use,
somebody gonna jump around the corner?
There's not a lot of special effects used. Like if you watch, you know, like we have The Ring. If you watch the original version of that, it's, you know, that's one of those movies we've taken from another country. The Grudge. The original is Ju-on, and the whole, I think like there's 2 or 3 Grudge movies. The whole however many we made embodies the first one in, I think they're originally Japan, correct me if I'm wrong, because like Japan and Korea both make some fantastic horror movies. And there's a lot that I've found that we've, Shudder is another one with Joshua Jackson's in it.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't write that movie.
No.
We
There's
took
also
that movie.
The Eye.
The Eye, yes, that was going to be my
one.
next one. The Eye is another one.
This was in that weird era of like the 2000s where they were just like, let's remake all these Japanese horror films, and it was
horror
like
films, and
just
it's like Japanese
shitty,
and Korea horror that we were just taking it
and destroying them.
And
it was like,
then
stop.
If you haven't seen the original versions of those movies, I
so much
absolutely recommend them. You will watch them and you will never want to watch the American versions again. You will be like, the American versions are shit compared to the original.
Same thing with Let the Light One In.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is also,
yeah.
Which is also another, apparently another gay horror film as well.
Yes, it is.
Or queer, probably.
Yes.
Queer, yeah.
What was the original country? What was the country that was originally?
Sweden.
Sweden. I was going to say I knew.
Which I didn't even know that had even like gay overtones when I watched it. I didn't pick it up, but
I think the reason why, if I remember correctly, that's considered is because when the little boy asks the vampire about themselves, the vampire says that they're not a boy or a girl.
Oh, okay.
Yes, that would
But
be.
that's
still,
kind of like
but he doesn't. But the little boy doesn't care, and he's just like, okay, well, can you be my friend or partner or girlfriend or something like that? And he doesn't really care.
Which I feel like is a very good example of like.
Unlike Sleepaway Camp.
Oh God. Which is just like on the other end.
I don't know what.
Yeah,
that ending is shocking.
Let's discuss the like overtones of queer people as the monster. Sleepaway Camp would.
I feel like that's a whole nother episode right there.
And Sleepaway Camp is somewhere in there. I'm not gonna pin that one down very closely, but that's somewhere in there. Another one, Psycho.
Yes.
Norman Bates is dressing in drag.
Yes.
And killing people. And and it's scary that it's Norman Bates dressed as a woman.
Hypertension is another one. But, man, if you haven't seen that movie, spoiler, but at the end of the movie, it's about this guy who's like chasing these girls, and it turns out one of the girls is actually psychotic, and she's envisioning herself as a guy, and she's in love with her friend. And she's been doing this entire time. But
sounds weird.
The movie's good, but the twist makes no sense for the whole movie.
Yeah, sometimes
like the
you
twist
feel like they
breaks the
shoehorn
movie.
them in.
Yeah, and it was like, but yeah, she was in love with her friend, and that's why she was doing all this crazy shit. I'm trying to think of other like. Go back to Interview with the Vampire, really.
Yeah, but they're more. But the vampires in Interview with the Vampire are the heroes in a way.
Yeah.
Or they're the anti-heroes.
Yes.
They're not.
Lestat is kind of in the movie, less so in the books, but in the movie, he's more like the monster in the movie.
Yeah.
Like he's the villain of the movie.
Yeah. I don't know. Those definitely.
He's also like the hero of the film too. It's weird, yeah.
I know.
Like you have sympathy for him throughout the entire thing, so you kind of understand where he's coming from.
Well, I think, and that's the magic of vampires. A lot of the times is because they're so human and also a monster, and also tragic, but also horrific.
Yeah, because I mean, you have to like, you have to think about it from that perspective. Like, how would you be? Of being alive for that long of time and going through the things you go through, seeing the things you go through, like how would that affect you as a person? Like you can't, like I can honestly say, when they have the good vampire, the bad vampire, one of my favorite shows when I was younger to watch was a vampire show called Forever Night. If you don't know, it's
I don't know. That sounds like sounds like
so
a deep cut.
The premise of the show is there is a guy who is a vampire. His last name is Knight, but like with a K, and he's a detective. So he's a good guy, but then there's a whole like there's like a society of bad vampires. But again, it basically was the first time, at a young age too, you start questioning like how would I have been had I go through that? Would I really? Because when you're younger, you think it's so easy to be the good guy, but as you grow as an adult, you start to consider and think of all the things that play into that, and you really start to think, would I? That
happens to Louis in Interview with the Vampire. I mean, it starts off, he's eating rats and chickens, and then by the end of the day, he's just like grabbing whoever. Whatever piece of shit he can find on the street. He's like, okay, that's who I'm going to attack.
Right, which, like, I don't feel like, I don't know. Could I confidently say, would I, if I was a vampire and I had to live through all this bullshit and like
I think after
see like
after
how
so many
like
centuries you're human.
Right, after centuries you see all the stupid things that humans do and the careless things that we do sometimes. And I feel like, yeah, I could get you to the point where you're just like, I don't care. Like, these people make so many mistakes. Like, I could see that easily happening where just such like disregard for them because from your perception of the way you've seen things on your timeline is you seeing us being careless.
Well, until you turn sparkly, meet a girl in the Pacific Northwest, and then have a romance to last the ages.
Shit, we're on top of those.
But it's okay because then you come back and you make a Batman movie and you blow everybody away.
Oh yeah, fine. Years later, bless his heart.
But there's
Lighthouse was awesome.
But I was gonna say in defense, there's some movies
did a lot of
in
movies
between there
Lighthouse
that are
incredible.
fantastic. And I personally was one of those people when I found out he was doing a Batman movie. I was fucking excited. I was ecstatic.
Oh, I think Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart are great actors, just that they were given really
bad roles.
Wooden roles for Twilight because they were so specific. Mm-hmm. And so from what I've heard, the books are very in the head of the character and not a whole lot of dialogue. So then converting a lot of the, like, what's going on in the head of the character to dialogue is difficult. Yeah. And, and supposedly now Twilight's having a renaissance.
I'm not surprised.
From what I heard, Gen Z has now discovered Twilight and is Twilighting all over again.
Yay.
And I'm like, well, at least they can read through them all, watch the movies, and be done.
Yeah.
Right.
They don't have to wait for 5 years for it to come to an end.
And I will say, I was very against Twilight for the longest time, and I hadn't read any of the books. I hadn't seen any of the movies. And one of my friends made a point to me, and she was like, that kind of goes against who you are as a person, saying you don't like something and not knowing anything about it, doesn't it? And I was like, you're right, it does. So then I sat and watched the movies, and I was like, yep, I still don't like them. Okay. At least I can say I still don't like them.
I've seen 2 of those movies.
I've seen them all.
And I watched them with riff tracks. That was the only way I can get through it, which is the guys from Mystery Science Theater. And even with that on, I was like, this sucks.
I had to push myself to get through it.
Even watching it with riff tracks, I was like, I cannot do this. This is horrific.
You know what? In my opinion, they're not bad. They're just okay. Yeah, but I think it was, we all have that kind of almost PTSD from Twilight that affects us because it was such a cultural phenomenon.
My big thing that was really irritated me was in the last one when they did that whole fake scene, it didn't really happen. Yeah. And it was very drawn out, and then you find out it didn't really happen. I was like, that was a waste of my time.
Yeah. I guess from what I heard, it made more sense in the book.
I don't.
But they just couldn't. I know. Who cares? I mean, but definitely one of our current pop culture concepts of vampires was created by Stephanie Meyer. Another, whether good nor bad, a woman once again has agency over creating a pop culture concept of a monster.
I guess I just prefer Anne Rice's version.
Yeah, Anne Rice has her own problems. Anne Rice has lots of problems.
Yep.
But I mean, it's still going strong. We've got What We Do in the Shadows coming out.
It seems like the women are holding up the horror culture. Really, though.
Yeah,
ultimately, there's some some men there, but it's.
Well, I feel like a lot of horror culture and people who make it and who are dedicated enough to do something about it are normally not the people that are the ones also making the Transformers.
True, no. That's true.
That's also, true. Hollywood's always loved horror because it's cheap and it has a fan base.
Yeah.
They know it's easy to make, it's cheap to make, and they can make it on the dime, and it's going to pull a profit because people are going to pay just to go see horror.
But then again, I feel like horror right now is getting a big money dump into a lot of the movies that are coming out. Think about anything Jordan Peele's doing. Those movies are high budget, very well made.
I'm not saying all of it.
Yeah, well made is good because I feel like we did go through a period of time where like a lot of stuff was being pumped out and it was not good.
Still, like most of your typical Hollywood summer blockbuster costs upwards of $150 and more. Most horror films, even like the higher ones, still only have a fraction of that for a budget. So it's still easier to make those movies than, a superhero movie for sure.
Yeah. I am surprised that we haven't seen, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, we haven't seen a lot of the sequels. I don't think Hollywood's learned this lesson. It's just taken a pause because it's going to do it again. We know it will.
Sequels of what?
Well, like Friday the 13th run through 50 zillion.
No, they just did the new Texas Chainsaw Massacre and it bombed.
Okay, so
that bombed so hard I didn't even hear about it.
There was a remake of that. And it was on a streaming service and like it got like terrible reviews. No one's been watching it. It's not getting.
Well, that's because we don't need another one.
No, we don't.
We need an original something, and I think that's kind of what Zach was saying. We don't need another regurgitated version of something that's like the 50 billionth regurgitation of it. We need something new. We need an original idea.
Eventually here you're going to see a new slew of remakes of horror films again. It's going to happen.
They don't soon. And it's
never going to die.
Stupid and it's ridiculous, and
people are going to see it because it's the
right.
Well,
that's
we're getting a Monsters remakes that looks freaking terrible.
That's kind of why I've withdrawn from like mainstream like current day horror, is just because I've gotten so tired of it, of the regurgitation. It's either a regurgitation of something that's been done a bunch of times already, or it's like that violent stuff like Saw. I'm like, neither one of those things are appealing to me. So I'll sit back and I'll go watch my.
Oh, and then we had the whole slate of static camera horror movies.
Paranormal Activity.
Paranormal Activity.
Where it was like that whole, just every horror movie.
It was like Blair
out.
Witch happened, and everybody was like, we're going to do that. I found some of my favorite horror movies, though, are like just really taking a dive into like finding indie stuff like that not a lot of people have heard of. That's really like been.
Randomly, Nicolas Cage has gone on like a horror movie streak.
Pig.
Mandy.
It's freaking awesome.
Like, all of a sudden he kind of pops back out of nowhere, does a bunch of like indie horror darling films, and then is kind of back on top. Although I do want to see that new one where it's about Nick Cage being Nick Cage.
I want to see that too.
That looks.
I've not seen
If
this.
you're gonna do that kind of film, you have to have a sense of humor, and so that makes me like. I think he gets it.
So I think at this point, we're going to end the episode here. We're diving into Nick Cage. I think that's a good sign of saying that.
Meandering.
Yes. Once again, you can find us at thespookydoor.com. You can find us there. We have merch for sale. We have our YouTube videos. We now have a TikTok. You can follow us on there. Yes, we finally.
Because everybody's ticking and talking.
We finally joined that era of social media. We also have Twitter. Find us at and Instagram, Facebook. Just search for us at the Spooky
everywhere.
Door. We are on every platform just about. Zach, do you have anything you want to promote? Anything? Nope.
Not at this time. I'm actually pretty boring at the current moment, but maybe I'll be back with something to plug in the future.
In the future, yeah.
And of course, if you have any questions, comments, or anything like that, you can send us an email at info@thespookydoor.com. Also, if you're listening to the podcast, please leave a 5-star review or whatever star review to help support the podcast as well.
P.S. I hope you guys like our new recording space. We didn't say anything about that.
Yes, we are now in our brand new home, our new studio. So we have new chairs and a whole new setup. We got rid of the table. I like this. It's very different.
It's very like family friendly.
Yes.
Like I feel like I'm just hanging out with my buddies.
We also want to thank Zach for being on the show and being such an amazing guest. And with that, journey with us next time through the Spooky Door.